Member Carlson?
Here.
Member Diaz?
Here.
Member Importante?
Here.
Vice Chair Beth Williams, absent. Chair David Scribner.
Present.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Transaction and Use Tax Citizen Oversight Committee, also known as the Measure U Committee, regular meeting. I'm calling this meeting to order. I just did, I guess. We took the roll. Okay. Are there any public comments?
There are none.
We'll now consider items on the consent calendar, which will be enacted in one motion unless a commissioner or member has a request to remove it for an item of discussion. Does anybody have something you'd like to discuss? May I have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar?
Make a motion to accept.
Second.
Okay. We have a vote?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries, motion passes. All in favor?
Okay, so we need to take a look at the minutes. Does anybody have a correction you'd like to make? Or can we adopt them as is? Are you going to have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed?
None. Motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, will staff please present the report?
Yes, thank you. And I know, I think this is our second meeting, but really our first substantive meeting since we had our new membership appointed. And so we want to give an overview of Measure U and our current budget process and where we're at in that budget process, and then get feedback from the committee on proposed Measure U expenses. I'll start, thank you, just quickly by, I know everybody here knows this, but just starting with the reminder that Measure U was the city's local sales tax that was approved to, at the time the ballot language actually officially read that it was approved to prevent elimination of the city's police department, maintain long-term financial viability and essential services, including quick 911 response, gang, drug, crime prevention and investigations, street, storm drain, pothole, and gutter repair, keep public areas clean and graffiti-free, and provide other general city services. And so that being the ballot language that was approved with Measure U, obviously the city council at that time appointed a Measure U oversight committee. And so today we are going to be taking you through the budget recommendations that we have at this point. And one of the things we have done was try to make sure that the recommendations that we are proposing fit within those categories. And I think some of the work that the Measure U committee did in the last year was really establishing what those priority areas were, even within those. And the Measure U committee over the last year had really asked staff to put a focus on public safety as a #1 priority, and as sort of second priority after that, public works and recreational activities for the community. And so we've put together a list that we think does those things. And so today we'll go through the budget a little bit, and then we'll to just try to give you some background, and then we'll go through that list with you. And so first we wanted to start with sort of some big picture background. I think two key areas, one directly related to Measure U, another maybe indirectly related to Measure U, are our sales tax trends and our cannabis revenue trends. And those are the two areas that I think we're seeing a lot of volatility The rest of the budget has really been pretty stable, but those two have been volatile, and in recent years, as you can see in this chart, have been on the downturn. You'll notice, I'll come back to this, but if you look at cannabis revenues, similar sort of downward trend where it was at a peak in 2022 and really has decreased almost every year since then. There's 1 year there that's a little bit of a spike, and then it decreased again. And with sales tax, it had been at a peak in about 2023 and has really decreased since that time as well. And so all else being equal, the rest of the budget doesn't really have major fluctuations from year to year, but sales tax and cannabis revenues, which are two of our main revenue sources, have had this downturn in recent years. So what we're looking at citywide is some reductions in some key areas. The sales tax revenue is related, directly related to Measure U tax revenue, because that's based on sales taxes as well. And so you can see here that it, like that chart showed before, it peaked in about 2023 and has been a gradual decline in 24, but we're expecting a further decline from 3.4 million at its peak in 23 to just about 3 million, and then now it's looking closer to 2.9 and 2.8 million over the next couple of years. And I think those are the cannabis revenues somewhat unique. Well, not our drop has been unique because our situation is that we're being surrounded by Oxnard and Ventura's dozens of dispensaries that are opening up. It is a statewide occurrence that, like, all cities are starting to compete more on that. We're just getting hit with it more than maybe some other cities. But sales tax, there's also some statewide trends that sales tax has been decreasing. I think it was restaurants that were really being impacted. As costs of everything go up, people start eating at home more. And so the city has a contract with HDL, which I think stands for, is it Hinterdelamis? I always forget
what does it stand for? I never even knew.
Hinterdelamis. It's just the partner's names, is my understanding, but I always forget what the H is.
Yeah, it's Hinterleiter.
Yeah,
Hinterleiter Delamis.
And so they are sort of the best practice typically. It's like most agencies contract with HDL. They are, because they contract with so many agencies, they are sort of the authority on sales tax. They are who will almost like all the agencies all sort of forecast based on what HDL is seeing. And I think, so HDL has projected a decrease and kind of a continued decrease right now, a softening with, economic uncertainty. But in Hueneme in particular, they actually saw even more of a decrease than the state average. And I think that's because we are heavy on those types of businesses that are seeing the biggest decrease being, what do we have? We have restaurants and we have grocery stores, really, and so we don't have a lot of, the other types of businesses like a Camarillo, who would have an outlet center, which might be a little bit less impacted right now. So sort of just big picture. I know this is probably getting into the weeds, but it's just that across our sales tax, across our Measure U, across our cannabis revenues, we're seeing decreases in those things. Other parts of our budget are fairly stable. So what that means is we're sort of trying to adjust in real time and on the fly with decreasing some expenditures and finding areas to decrease to kind of match what we think is our new reality. Sales tax could come back. Sales tax, I think it's in a downturn, and at some point it'll probably start to climb again. I think cannabis revenue, what my expectation is that isn't going to return to the level it was. So it's like, for us, we're like, okay, let's just start adjusting to the new economic reality. So all that is background to then show you this chart, which is a lot of information in one chart. It's a lot to take in. And so I'll try to highlight a couple of the key points. I think some of the key points we wanted to show is you can see there that going back to fiscal year 23-24 adopted budget, and the fiscal years make things more complicated. I like to try to keep it simple. It's hard to with fiscal year, but the fiscal year 23-24 budget would have been adopted on June 30th, 2023. And that was really before all the cannabis dispensaries opened around us and everything. So you can see where at that point, we essentially had about $30 million plus in revenues. And at that point that year, they had about a $33 million budget, including operations and major projects. And so then you fast forward to what we're looking at now, and we're looking at we're trying to really kind of pare it down. And 26 and 27, which are the budgets we're working on now that we're looking at, we're down from 33 million to about 29 million. So more than a 10% reduction, a $4 million reduction. And so it's sort of, we're trying to really kind of operationally change how we do things and reduce how much we're spending to do things. I think when I started on this process about 2 years ago, I was pretty confident we could get balanced. I think we got everybody in the room. We kind of understood that this was something we needed to proactively address and not just wait and hope things get better. So we started on that process. But the challenge that is going to really make it tough that I hadn't anticipated is the cost of everything going up at the same time. And so for us, you can see like 24 revised budget, we did immediately make reductions to drop our budget down to about 27. Our revenues, we had decreased forecast to 27.2, and then we had gotten operations down to 27.1. But even though we've been cutting since then, our proposed budget for next year is 27.9. And so it's still.
Can I ask, what does O and M mean?
Operations and maintenance.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and then CIP is capital improvement projects. And so it's just like, it's a continuing battle because if you cut your budget, when you're talking on the scale of millions of dollars, if you cut your budget from 30 to 29, but then inflation the next year is 5%, you're right back at 30. So it's kind of what we're experiencing. And so we've continued to sort of keep trying to do things more efficiently. We've continued to try to reduce, and if you look at every year other than that first year where we knew that we needed to make reductions, we're keeping our costs pretty in line, but it's hard to keep reducing it after that first year of reductions. So there's a lot to take in this chart. I think a couple of points we highlighted. The revenues have reduced from that 30.2 million in 24 to now we're expecting 27.5 or 27.8 million. So they've reduced, and they've been in that range over the last couple of years, and they're pretty flat if you notice from the 27.2 to 27.5 to 27.5 to 27.8. So those revenues they've been stable, which is good. It's better than a reduction, but they haven't been increasing. And so those have been flat. Costs and inflation are increasing, which creates the challenge of doing more with less and paying more to do the same things we used to do for less. So those are some of the battles we're facing right now. The big thing that jumps out to people in this chart is the fact that in 25 revised budget, we had a $6 million CIP program. And so that would be one point where people might point and say, well, wait a minute, if you guys were trying to spend less, why did we spend so much that year on CIP? And that's a timing issue that we had several multi-year projects. And the good news is we got them all done, which is an accomplishment. But the bad news is we then had to pay for them all on the same year. So that year was a year, I think about maybe $4 million of that was for Bubbling Springs. Oh. And then $2 million was for other projects that we had gotten done that we had been working on over the years. So that stands out as, I think, if I were trying to explain this chart, it would be that it basically, since we saw what was happening with cannabis on June 30th, 2023, I think I started with the city July 10th, 2023. we basically came in and said we need to start figuring out how to spend less and still get some things done. So we've done that over the last couple of years, but good news, but sometimes good news has bad news with it is we also managed to get some projects done that we needed to get done, but that resulted in having to pay for them in that year. But other than that, you'll see that trend is the cost of in other years where we were finding ways to reduce our expenditures. And so Ashley and I are literally, to this last bullet point, Ashley and I are literally working on the budget as we speak. We were working on it prior to this meeting, and we'll go back to working on it right after this meeting. We've been continuing to try to balance it. We had done a presentation to council about 3 months ago saying if we don't make further reductions, we have about a $2.5 million deficit. So the good news is we've already almost cut that in half, but we still have half of that left to go. So we're still working on it. Right now, we're still trying to make reductions without impacting our service levels. If that's the hard part. If we were to say, well, we don't need to have a staff person at the front counter to help, people that come into City Hall. Well, I can save money that way, but is that really, the level of service we want to provide? So right now, the focus has been on looking at things that reductions that can be made without impacting service levels, and we've been pretty successful at that. We just have more work to do. So this is all background because for this reason, it'll tie into the projects that are being proposed to be Measure U projects this year. And there are some things, and I think it's in keeping with that ballot language we read, is there's just some things we wouldn't be able to afford to do if we didn't have Measure U. A lot of that ballot language talked about being able to provide public safety for the community, and as you probably saw, a lot of the proposed expenditures for Measure U would be public safety, including being able to actually pay for some of the positions, which is something that the Measure U committee had supported in the past. So we proposed doing that again at this time. And so if you don't mind, Chair, if I can quickly go through these and then we maybe can, just from like a high level, and then we can have a question and answer. So we'll start with the public safety. We broke them up into those 3 areas that the Measure U committee had said were priority areas. So public safety, I won't go through every number in particular, but just to explain that, so the police sergeant would be that one actual sergeant position. The police officer seniors is 2 full-time senior officers. The police officer half FTE is, I think what we were proposing was we have an officer who's half paid for by another funding source, and this would be paying for the other half of them.
That's the
homeless
marijuana?
liaison. Yeah. So it's half cannabis and half cannabis sort of, enforcement and follow-up, and then half homeless liaison officer. So the cannabis program has to pay for the half cannabis, but this would pay for the other half of that, which has been one of our critical positions in the last couple years. And then the public safety dispatcher is 3 of the dispatchers. I think we have a total of 6 currently, so it's about half of the dispatchers. And then we are currently in the process of trying to create, our dispatch center was outdated, significantly outdated. And then it also got hit by the flood, the storm that we had, and then it was outdated and then it had to actually move into a back closet essentially. So it's definitely not, it was a back room, but it's definitely not, the 21st century modern high quality dispatch center that I think our dispatchers deserve. Not that, we're not proposing doing anything luxurious either, but it's just, it's not even, really up to standard right now. And so we had a project to rebuild the dispatch center. And so a lot of that project is we're using other funding sources, but two of the items that we're proposing through Measure U would be the computer-aided dispatch system, and that pays for the actual system that the dispatchers use, and the third dispatch console, because they currently had 2 dispatch consoles, and when there's like an emergency situation, they don't have a way right now to have a third person come answer phones, and so we're trying to add that third console so that we have the ability to do that. And then police body cameras and tasers. You know, body cameras are something that are required in best practice, but we have to pay, figure out how to pay for them. And then tasers are, I think everybody knows what those are, but it's just another non-lethal tool that we have, another non-lethal tool that our officers can use. The evidence freezer replacement, that one is interesting. I think it caught our eye, and we asked a lot of questions when we were meeting with the police department, but essentially something we've learned a lot about in the last couple of days going through these is all of the evidence requirements that go into making sure the officers, when they arrest someone, that the evidence is safe, secure, and really even just maintained, so that so that the arrest actually sticks, and that there's not a chain of custody issue or something like that. And so some of the things we learned about this is like that literally, there's freezers that are built that send alerts to the the detectives if there's any issue with the freezer, so that evidence doesn't get destroyed. If there's a power outage and all of a sudden your evidence thaws out, essentially, So it was interesting to us learning about that, because at first glance we were like, what is this, But it's a tool that our detectives and our officers have
That's
asked.
a question. Is this some large freezer? I mean, or just something that has alarms on it, I'm wondering.
Yeah, I think it's more like it's, because we have one currently, but it's outdated and it doesn't have all the smart functionality. And it's almost, I was gonna say, the way they described it almost reminds me of just like home appliances now, how like now they have like the fridge that'll send you a text, or like the stove that'll like send you a text, But for us, the need was twofold: is they have a freezer, but they're running out of space, and then now they want to make sure that they get the one that has all the functionality that they need. That was another item we proposed, and I should have said this earlier, but we show 2 numbers, and that's because we adopt a 2-year budget, and so we have the items that are proposed for this coming fiscal year, July 1st to June 30th, July 1st, 25 to June 30th, 26. And then that second column is the ones that we're planning to do July 1st, 26 to June 30th, 27. And so some of those items, like the freezer is a one-time item that would be this year. The police uniforms and safety vests, et cetera, is a one-time item that would be the following year. And then firearms and range equipment, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. And then the crossing guard services is a partnership we have with the school district. If you've ever wondered who pays for the crossing guards on Ventura Road, for example, near the schools, it's a partnership between the city and the school district. We each pay for half. So we're proposing that. And that one, I actually believe, I'm pretty sure the history on that is that was actually something that was cut at one point and sort of prompted Measure U.
They were stopped the crossing guards.
Yeah.
And that's a really dangerous street with crazy people on it, so it wasn't upsetting.
So that's almost, it's sort of been something we've always tried to keep with Measure U, because it was part of the history of it, of sort of promising the community that, we couldn't afford that before Measure U, but if we do Measure U, these are, this is a service that we'll provide. So this is public safety, and the two other sections we mentioned that,
Can I stop for a second?
Sure.
Before we get, does anybody have any questions or comments about what is being presented?
I have a question.
Sure.
As far as the crossing guard services,
Mhm.
is that just for like school district areas, or is it also for the recreational events that we have throughout the year, such as the Christmas tree lighting or?
So the crossing guard services, this specific line item is the ones that we partner with the school district to provide near schools during those school arrival and school, what is that, departure times. So that's specific to that. We do for special events, we have typically what we do for special events is we have a community services officer that people might see. She's usually out driving like kind of a truck, and she has a uniform, but it's a different color uniform. And so when we have like a special event, we'll coordinate with PD to ask if the community service officer can come and, she usually pulls the truck up kind of in the street and directs traffic and, helps people cross. So we do provide that service, and we have that, but it's separate from this.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on public safety?
Yeah, I have questions, but I'll wait until the end after the presentation.
Got it. Okay, so the other two sections that had been identified as priority were those streets and maintenance related items, which also was in the ballot language, ballot measure language, and then the other one was the recreational. So we'll start with streets and maintenance. It's broken out similarly with the 2 fiscal years, and so the items that we had proposed was essentially one maintenance employee focused specifically on parks, pier, and graffiti abatement. And so that is shown for both years. We have a program that we started last year that we're doing a test, but we were gonna try it out for a couple years, which is the Neighborhood Speed Cushion Installation Program. And we were getting a lot of requests from neighborhoods that were asking us to put in those speed cushions. So we had essentially talked in last year about setting aside $50,000 per year, and we have a process where neighborhoods can apply for them if they have a certain amount of people making the request, and then we'd review it and potentially install those. So that would pay for 1 year of the Neighborhood Speed Cushion Installation Program. There's a couple of items here related to storm drains. And when we were looking at the budget very closely, it's always, there's certain things that are like the things that are popular and people don't want to cut. And then there's other things that it's like, well, people really don't think about, these types of things. And I think storm drains are one of those that normally falls into that category. But thankfully, I think we had really put an emphasis on storm drain clearing, and then we had some pretty historic rains immediately after. And I think for us, it was like a good reminder and a lesson that that stuff may not get the headlines or be glamorous, but it's pretty critical and proved to be very necessary, I think, with some of these storms that we've had recently. So we have showing there storm drain maintenance and clearing for the second year of the budget. And then I'll skip down and then come back. The Pearson Road storm drain repairs is a major storm drain repair that we were looking to make this year. So then moving back up, just street maintenance supplies, that's just things like the equipment and the materials to do street maintenance. And so we have a few funding sources, but this allows us to do more of it, which I would say in my shoes, I think one of the most frequent questions that we'll get on a day-to-day basis is about when are my streets being paved, or can my potholes get fixed, or can you fix this crack in our sidewalk? I think to this, it's not uncommon, but even just like right now, that's still the number one question we get. And then there are 2.5 street staff members who are focused on specifically maintaining streets, alleys, sidewalks, public right-of-ways, and then parking lots. And so we propose allocating those to Measure U. Those have been pretty critical recently, including with the Bubbling Springs project and the library reopening on May 3rd, that we were able to, for not very much money, since we have the staff and the supplies and everything, we were able to get those parking lots maintained and ready to go for when everything reopens, which would have been a challenge otherwise. And one of the things that's interesting is how quick parking lots can go bad. The library parking lot at one point looked like it had, it was closed for about 18 months, but it looked like at one time, it looked like nobody had been there for 10 years, when the weeds started popping up and everything. So if you go there now, it's starting to look, well, it does look good again. The library looks good, the mural looks good, the parking lot looks good. We're working on the landscaping still, trying to get that ready for the grand opening. And then I mentioned this right before the meeting, and I'll highlight it now because it addresses a couple of issues. But that Miranda Park project is actually supposed to be a grant-funded project. It's not a Measure U project. We just I think it was before we knew it was a grant-funded project, we had put it on this list as a possibility, and then we forgot to pull it off. So that project would be coming off of this list. We aren't recommending that as a Measure U project.
So it's basically $90,000 less, is a little shy of $500,000 instead of $590.
Yeah, and I don't know that, I know we had talked to Public Works about that earlier. I don't think we had yet identified where that 90,000 could go, right? We didn't have a chance, we didn't do that yet. Yeah, yeah. So we hadn't reallocated it, so to speak. So that's a conversation that we can have. And then Parks and Recreation. I know in the past we had talked about the lifeguard program being a priority project with Measure U committee, and so we had identified. There's two things related to the lifeguard program on this list. It's the lifeguard vehicle, but it's also the recreation and ocean safety supervisor is essentially the main staff person related to the lifeguard program. Our recreation department is probably much smaller than anybody would think. We have, I think we have 3 full-time employees. 3 full-time employees. So all the recreational events we do is with 3 full-time employees. And so one of them is basically takes on all the lifeguard program duties. So that is the position listed here. And then the recreation coordinator is the person who coordinates all of the events. The things like the senior holiday luncheon, the Touch a Truck event, the Spooktacular event, or last week's extravaganza event. So that's that recreation coordinator position. And then lower on the list are those actual funding for those actual events. I skipped over, second swing set. I do want to note, we talked about being in the middle of the budget process and having to make some difficult decisions. And at this point, my proposal is going to be removing the second swing set project at this time because as we're trying to get balanced, just on the list of necessities, it's not quite a necessity. And so,
Where would that be?
and so we had essentially, I'll give you sort of the history of even why it's on the list is, I think people know about the swing set, that the city had removed the swing set because it was, I think, a broken piece or something. And yeah,
Not really.
I've heard, it was before my time, so I've heard versions, but for whatever reason, the city removed the swing set. But the problem is, when you remove something, if you want to put it back, it has to be to ADA standards and completely, modernized. And it had just been, probably a 30-year-old swing set at that point there.
At least.
Yeah. And so they realized when they took it out, I think they thought well, we'll just buy another swing set for $15,000 and put it out there. But what happened is then building inspectors get involved, and it's it has to be ADA standards on a beach, which means you have to create a concrete path with a rubberized coating, and so it became I think think it was included as part of a project, but it was six figures. You know, it was probably in the $100,000 to $150,000 range. And so we went through that process. We got that project done. It was something that like really the community had demanded for a long time. It probably showed up in that year that we talked about where we had gotten a lot of projects done in that one year. And so, so that project is done. The swing set's there. It's open. I was glad to see a bunch of kids playing on it yesterday when I went out. But it created a possibility for us where, because that one now meets ADA standards, we could now just buy a cheap, you know, not cheap, but a basic swing set and put it on the beach because we're complying with ADA standards on the primary one. So we had started to, before we knew the full picture of the budget, we had said, let's earmark that. And if we have the money, that's like, you know, something where you get a lot of bang for your buck, basically. But as we sit here today, I think we're going to put that on a list for a couple years down the road once we really get the budget fine-tuned. So we're proposing putting that on pause for a couple of years. And so there's that. I think the only thing I haven't touched on is the senior exercise program. So that is the program, if you're not familiar, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, the city does a free exercise program for seniors at the community center. And it's one of those like, you don't believe it till you see it, because I had heard about it and I didn't really believe it till I saw it. But when you go, it's probably 75 to 100 seniors every Monday, every Wednesday, every Friday out exercising. And so it's something that the city has provided and has really built up. And so that's also a proposed project at $9,500 per year, because the only expense with that is essentially we give them this, we provide the space, but the only expense is we have to pay an instructor. So again, it's just a lot, it's a pretty good bang for your buck. And then one key thing I want to highlight with the recreation portion in particular. First year, you'll notice only $94,000 in recreation programs. That's because of that decrease that we showed. With a slight increase expected next year, not much, but just a slight increase, that's reflected in that 26-27, where we essentially, recreation is what gets cut this year. So when we expect it to start kind of stabilizing, we're trying to get it, put it back into rec next year, like the following year, basically. So that's why there's a big difference between this year's amount and next year's amount. So to summarize that, because that was a lot of detail, what we expected was $2.8 million in Measure U revenue for for fiscal year 25-26, so July 1st, 25 to June 30th, 26. And then a slight increase to $2.88 million in fiscal year 26 and 27. And so wrapping that up here, we show that public safety is proposed to be pretty stable, 1.89 million to 1.91 million over those 2 years. Pretty stable with, like we said, it just gets a little more expensive to do, you know, the same things. Streets and maintenance, we have a decrease showing because there's some projects in next year's budget, and then that would not then need to continue in the future year budget. And then Parks and Rec, like we just said, is sort of where we had to decrease this year, and then it kind of builds back up the following year. And without some of those streets projects, some of those funds move from there to Parks and Recreation. So we have proposed, what we've shown is the revenues matching the expenditures, with now the one catch being that there's the 92,000 from, what item was that again? Miranda Park, that is grant funded, and so now there will be essentially $90,000 that we would that would need to be reprogrammed. So
And the swing set too.
Oh yeah, the 15,000 for the swing set. And my proposal for the swing set, it's 15,000, would just be moving it to would be moving it to help pay for some of those public safety costs that we talked about. So just kind of moving that. The 92,000 for Miranda Park, that might be something we want to talk about as the committee. So with that, that was sort of the overview, and we're happy to answer any questions.
All right, I'll go ahead. Yeah, thanks for the presentation. So I'm not sure how much of the public realizes how challenging this is. It's almost like constantly walking a tightrope in order to balance budgets. And so I guess in terms of the timing, I wasn't sure if that was covered earlier. I may have missed it, but so you're at the stage where departments already submitted their budgets, and so is there, it sounds like there's a funding gap still that you're trying to close, and just wanted to know how big of a funding gap, or is that too early to share? So is it that bottom line we're seeing?
Yeah, so we, there's a couple good points you bring up that I want to make sure to respond to. And so we, what was it, 18 months ago when we made the initial reductions, is we had the department meetings and we had the reduction meetings, and then we kind of came out of it, and as reflected on here, we had really reduced the operational expenses, but then we kind of reset this year with another round of department meetings. And then we've also, after we had those department meetings and we started to put some numbers together, and we saw at that point, a bigger gap of almost double what this is we then had the 5% reduction conversation again. And I think the challenge that I keep sort of, every time I have the chance, I try to remind everybody, it's like cutting 5% one time isn't that tough. Cutting 5% two times, it's exponentially harder. And then it's like, and if you look at our budget, it's like, and then to try to find another 5%, it's like at some point you can't cut anymore, or, well, let me say it this way. You can't cut anymore without impacting service levels, which is what we've tried to avoid. So we've done those two rounds, and now Ashley and I are kind of going back to a couple of departments and trying to find the additional savings we need. I think one of the challenges we have as a city, and we identified this 2 years or 18 months ago, but the problem is there's not an immediate solution to it, is that the city has never had a capital improvement project funding source. So when I got here about 18 months ago, we created a CIP reserve, and we said any surplus we have is going to go into the CIP reserve. It was a great plan, except we haven't had a surplus since then. So I think for us, the long term that we're looking at is like really what I think is going to be realistic is trying to figure out how to balance our operational budget against our operational revenues, and then figure out a CIP funding source. Because it's just you can see here, it's like, and as projects go up in cost and everything, it's like trying to pay for the CIP from the general fund without a specific funding source. It's just always going to be a battle, So right now there's a gap. I think one of the things I was trying to explain that for is because if you look at this year's, we've almost gotten there where the operational expenses match the revenues, but then the CIP is the difference. Right. And so that's where, we have a reserve fund of about $8 million at this point. And so, a fund balance of $8 million at this point. And so for us, it's like we're trying to get as balanced as possible and trying to do it over the next couple years where we'd still, if you can kind of forecast that out, we'd still have fund balance left and try to turn around the ship before we're out of fund balance. Yeah. So it's kind of a goal we're working towards, but it's a long way to say that I don't know that we're going to completely close the gap this year.
Got it.
So,
I appreciate you mentioning that CIP reserve. One of the
Yeah.
thoughts that ran through my head when I was looking at this screen, I was like, oh, maybe they're funding it out of the reserve for
Yeah,
CIP.
we
But
actually
now you explained it, so now it makes sense.
We actually did create a very small CIP reserve, but it was a great idea. It was just probably executed 3 years too late.
Yeah.
If we had executed that when when we saw the chart, when the revenues were up here, we would have really had built up a good CIP reserve.
And then the second question I had was related to service levels. Are we bound by any, like, our own ordinances in terms of service levels, like having to maintain a certain, say, like a sworn deputy to the population ratio? Or I know some communities have that either in a general plan or other
Yeah.
codified.
Not a specific service level. We have there's some general commitments and things like the ballot language where we essentially committed to maintain our police department. And then within our police department, they have police officers have a requirement that you have, so many officers on duty at any one time and per population.
Right.
But we don't have any specific like city ordinances setting other standards other than that.
Got it. And then I know in budgeting, I kind of describe it to folks, it's like that job is about divvying up the pie.
Yeah.
And so sometimes, we just kind of focus on divvying up the pie, but there's also an important piece of, under, like, I'll say economic development, which is like growing the pie. And I know it's not part of a Measure U expenditure, but, part of my thoughts, and this comes from some of my background as an economic development manager, is, have we looked at, what are those opportunities to maybe diversify our revenue portfolio? And so I know you mentioned some of the HDL reports identifying restaurants and some of the businesses where we've seen those declines.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like, okay, well, maybe what are the opportunities to fill those vacancies? Because I've seen, we've seen businesses leave or shut down, but then others fill it in. And then, maybe taking advantage of some other opportunities that are near the city. I know with Channel Islands Harbor, there's a proposed development. Carl's, it's a entertainment venue, like a theme park, and that could draw visitors in the area. So I'm thinking about that intersection, Olivera Plaza, and what's our relationship like with that property owner or manager, and filling those vacancies in that area that would maybe complement some of those visitor attraction services. And so that's one thing I wanted to put out there. Maybe probably have to be funded in another area of the budget, but some of that analysis. And I know recently you've done an economic development plan as well. So I don't know, perhaps that's reflected in there as well. And then I think the last piece was about the CIP. But I think I'll table that question since we're trying to grow the gap, not add to it. So I had some ideas, but I'm like, let's put that on hold. But overall, I think the proposed uses are consistent with the ordinance. So I don't have any issues with what's being recommended here. And I think I'll leave it at that. So
Thank you. Yeah, and the points on economic development and increasing revenues is well taken. We were just talking this morning, and we were just saying we need to get through looking at expenditures because the next thing is looking at revenues and trying to figure out how to increase them. So it's I think that's going to be a focus over the next year, probably like it hasn't been before. So
Yeah.
we're going to put a focus on that.
And I guess I did have maybe a closing statement, but as a resident, I've lived here my adult life for the last 5 years. I grew up here as so the perspective's different now as an adult. But honestly, my wife and I, we can't think of another community in Ventura County we want to live in. So
Awesome.
that's why at the beginning I want to say I don't think the public understands how challenging this is, because we look at our roads, they seem great. I don't experience as many potholes as I do in other cities in the area. The amenities that we've added to our parks, excellent. And so again, we're doing, I think, overall a good job, but understand, the challenges. So
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I take the opportunity whenever I can to highlight, because I don't think a lot of the public thinks about this, that we are unusual for being such a small city and having our own police department. And I think it's something that, like, I think we're all like proud of that, and I think our community is proud of it. But what is always interesting is, like, I'll talk to people and I'll be like, well, yeah, you know, Camarillo doesn't even do that. And people will be like, well, yeah, they do. They have their own police department. I'm like, no, they contract with the sheriffs. They just put Camarillo police on their vehicles, you know? And so I came from a sheriff's contract city, and there's good and bad with everything. And I have a lot of positive things to say about the sheriff's department. But the one thing I see is, if you're in a small city, you don't get to fine tune the service to what your community's asking for, because they serve 750,000 residents across the county, and they got to make sure they're serving everybody the same, because they can't, you know, it's too complicated otherwise. So I think one thing I always like to highlight is, you know, it's like, it is unusual. I think we're the smallest city in the county to have a police department. The only other one even close is Santa Paula, and they're actually talking about potentially going to sheriffs, you know? So there's a lot of, that's something I think the community's proud of. I think part of this, you know, we just read the ballot language. It literally says in there, one of the goals was to make sure that we maintain that. And that's great, but it's like the challenge of that, and the reason why other people don't do it is because it's hard to balance the budget for a small city and provide all those services. So, we're pretty proud of what we've done, and I think Measure U Committee has been a key part of that. I can honestly say, and I don't know that I saw this like 2 years ago, but I see it clearly now, maybe because 2 years ago we had, you know, other revenue sources, but I think right now more than ever, you can see if we didn't have Measure U, we'd be having to have some difficult conversations about those services that, you know, the street paving, the police services, and all those things. So Measure U and the role you have and that we have with you is critical in maintaining all those things. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Any other questions, comments? When we finally did the accounting, after all those years of getting no information, we had like $3.5 million left over that had not been spent, which worked out well because it went into the parks and we got that taken care of. But we had a reserve. And what I would like to see happening moving forward is that we don't spend every dime. You know, at some point, the pier's going to get knocked down again, or we have another flood, or who knows. You can't really anticipate how many things can go wrong, but you know that they will. So my sense is it was really nice to have that money there to get us through the hump with and it kind of happened by accident, but it
worked out.
Don't look a gift horse in the mouth, right?
Yeah.
So it worked out, but I'd like to see us not spending every dime on this. So for some of the things that you pulled out of it, if there's a way to put it in a lockbox, or I'm not sure how to, maybe that goes to the community development fund. I don't know, but
I agree with you completely on the idea, and it's sort of my goal. Big picture is the goal is we're working towards trying to reduce our expenditures to get back to living within our means, and actually, and going back to CIP funding and then the long-term goal is to actually be saving money up to be able to do the projects. I think the challenge, and I think my ask would be, I think we're in that transition, we're right in the middle of it, and this is Ashley's tired of hearing me say this, but I said all the rainy day funds that I created 18 months ago, I didn't know that the rainy day was gonna be this year, you know? And so it's like, this is that rainy day year where like all the money that we said, well, let's put this aside for if, you know, our revenues really drop, and if the cannabis industry goes away, and if this, it's like, that all happened, you know, this year. So.
And the sewer fell apart.
Yeah, the sewer fell apart, and we had a storm that we didn't expect, which, like, we are actually pretty fortunate at the end of the day with that storm. And even having said that, I think it was still $300,000-$400,000 worth of damage, and like that's less than what other cities had. So, so it was like that. Literally, the rainy day fund had to get addressed with that. So, but so I agree with you on the sentiment. I think we're on the same page that the goal is, it's like, okay, so revenues dropped, we need to figure out how to reduce expenditures to that, and then eventually be below that so that we can start building up the savings and building up funding sources. But I don't think this year's the year we're gonna do it, you know. And one of the analogies that I keep giving is, like, I keep when I talk to people is like, you know, if, like, I have a job for like 5 years and I make a good living and I get used to like a certain standard of living, and then I lose my job, and it's like, that's the day where you start going, well, let's reevaluate what we're spending. Do I need this, you know, car payment? Do I need this? Do I need this? And the goal is, it's like, in the meantime, going back to revenue, it's like you start looking for another job, or you look for ways to supplement your income, and you're doing that, but you also have to, the first thing you have to do is cut down on your expenses. And so then it's like, you cut down on your expenses, the goal is you find a way to get your revenues back to where they are, and then hopefully, like, you know, the goal would be to keep your expenses low and start rebuilding your savings account and start building your emergency fund and all that stuff. But I'm like, where I think this year, looking at like the budget projections and everything, is like, this is the year that we lost our job and we have to cut our spending and figure out how to increase our revenue and get it back, and then start building up those savings accounts. So we're on the same page. I think what happened, we were trying to be proactive, and really that cannabis revenue and sales tax increase happened faster than everybody thought and faster than projected. And we thought we were ahead of the curve. People were saying, you guys are 2 years ahead, and it just happened, you know. For us, especially with Oxnard and Ventura just opening up the 16 dispensaries, you know, it happened the day that happened. So I think we're still working on that balancing, and then, but I agree with you, and I think my ask would be this year to use it to sort of help get us through that tough year, but with the goal that by the next time we're having our budget conversation, that we'd have looked at revenues, we'd have looked at some other things, and we'd be talking about building up some savings. So,
I'll accept that.
Yeah.
As far as a revenue source goes, the first thing that comes to mind to me is bed taxes with short-term vacation rentals,
Yep.
which, you know, we're in the process of working on. And that holds a lot of potential. If it's done well, if it's done poorly, it's going to create a lot of problems.
Yeah.
But you got some templates to work with that
Yeah.
look like they're going to go pretty well. So I see that as a potential pretty good source. If we could start marketing this place, you know, we got this beautiful beach.
Yeah.
And all these birds to look at, if you like birds. A lot of people do.
Yeah.
So if we could start somehow get that in line and start promoting it, I think that it has to help.
Yeah.
So-
We have some things in the works. Short-term rental is a great example. We have the survey live right now that anybody who hasn't filled it out can fill it out on our website right now, with the idea that I think that closes May 16th. And then our plan is from that, have a couple follow-up meetings where we talk about what those regulations and potentially what, you know, the fees and those types of things would be for licensing short-term rentals. So there are a few things in the works. I think that's where we had talked at one point about, well, we're planning to do some of these things. Do we start building those revenues in? But we want to be conservative right now and not count any chickens until they hatch. So those are in the works, and there's a few of them out there that hotel tax with the short-term rentals and some of our fees and things like that. We actually haven't increased our trash fees for 12 years, I think it is. So there's some things on our list there.
The other one that comes to mind is a few years ago, they had Measure M, which was going to have business taxes on some of the port activities. And they basically bought their way out of it, scared everybody, brought in these consultants, told people over at the port they'd lose their jobs, none of which was true, and it failed. And I always felt like every place else you go, if you have a business, you got to pay a business tax, and I don't understand how come we can't get that done.
I actually had not heard that, so that's something.
Well, literally, they came in with consultants from out of state to talk. I know people that work at the harbor where they were literally told, you know, you're gonna lose your job if this happens. I mean, for what? 1/10 of 1% of a dollar, that comes, it's like
Yeah.
ridiculous,
Yeah.
but they scared everybody and it worked. So
Interesting.
maybe it's time to revisit that again. And then the last comment, the swing is in. I am on the beach every day. I've never seen it empty. There's always somebody using it. It's a pretty good resource, and you know, if we get money, another one would be great, but you would hope to, if you make a capital improvement, that people would actually take advantage of it, and so far, that's a total hit, so.
Yeah, that is true, and that's part of it. You know, we've talked about just making sure that when we do something, it's what really, you know, it's really what we need or what the community's looking for, and not just doing things to do them. You know, I think people are aware, but there were some like future projects that the city had talked about starting to like spend some money on designing that, you know, kind of fall in the other category that we had put on pause because it was just like when times are tough, like spending money on this thing that we're not even sure anybody will use isn't really the
Yeah, let's put the money away.
priority. Yeah, so
Sock it, put away for a better day.
yeah, so I think between the swing set and Bubbling Springs Park, which I have also been out there and seen cars lying down the street for, I think so far the projects that we did put the money into are definitely giving the community its money worth. So thank you.
I do have one thing I wanted to add. As far as the beach and the swing set that we added, and I also go onto the beach every day, and I know we have the volunteer cleanup every Saturday at 8:30 to 10. I was curious if maybe not this year's budget, but somewhere in the near future, if the trash cans would maybe be upgraded on the beach. I know that's kind of very specific, but that is something that would really benefit the trash
Yeah.
and the pollution, because right now a lot of the trash cans have faulty lids, or they don't stand up correctly, or if people take off the lids, the birds will take the trash and spread it and stuff. So that would be something
Okay.
maybe in the future.
Yeah, I think we had put some different ones out, but it was more on the walkway
Yeah.
as sort of like a test. There were those metal
Those are
ones.
great. I love those.
Well, it's funny. I'd say most people were positive about them. A few people didn't like the look of them. Like they thought that they looked too, I
I'd
think, like
prefer that
industrial.
than trash.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is something that we've worked with Public Works on, and we were trying out those different ones. We also, those were at the beach, and then also at the bus stops, we're actually trying out the new high-tech ones that actually like alert Public Works when they need dumped and all that kind of stuff. So we're sounds funny to say, but it's like we're constantly testing out new trash cans, you know.
Thank you. I
But I'll follow up with Public Works on that because we were putting those out as a test, and then we were going to see how it went, and then kind of figure out what we were doing from there. The good news, well, it could be a potential future item. The good news is that even though our budget's pretty tight, we do have in other funds we do have some maintenance budget, and I think would have money in there for new trash cans and things. But it's just something we'd have to look at, like specific
Of course.
options.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. So Ashley was just reminding me that the new high-tech ones that we were trying at the bus stops, we actually got a grant to cover those too. So
Are those bolted down?
I think so. I think so. Yeah. So far they've been
Sounds like
okay.
something that might go missing if it's
Yeah.
pricey.
Yeah. So far we've been okay with them, other than we've had a couple hit with graffiti. But our graffiti team has done a pretty good job. If they get out there right away and paint them, and hopefully people don't notice it. So
The graffiti people are amazing.
thank you.
When I go for my walks, I take a picture of graffiti. It's always gone.
Yeah.
They're on it. I mean, it's hard to believe and I never see them, by the way. It's just
Yeah.
the graffiti's always gone.
It's
I
magic.
feel like it's normally the same day that they
Yeah.
come out and they paint it and it's gone. You'll see
Yeah.
it in the morning and then I'll think, was that actually there
Yeah.
or not? So it is very nice that they're
Yeah.
on top of that.
Yeah, and that's where, when we talked about, like, we're trying to balance the budget and reduce some costs, but keep maintaining service levels is, you know, it is an accomplishment, and I want to, like, highlight the Public Works Department and the Housing and Facilities Department that do all those things, is we managed to, they were able to reduce the budget, you know, what is it, the 3 or 4 million from, you know, a couple years ago, but still provide that service. And so we're trying to figure out how to do it while still providing the service levels. So
Any other comments or thoughts, or?
Just one more, I guess, along the lines of some of those beach amenities. I know I kind of held off on mentioning additional amenities or expenditures, but I was wondering if there was like an equivalent to like a Friends of the Library or like a Friends of the Beach, where I've had the thought occasionally where, maybe I wanted to donate like a bike rack to complement the that tool set that's right outside of the beach.
Yeah.
You know, a couple friends and I, we like to go biking, and so I don't know if there was that opportunity here or how that would be received by the city. So it was just a thought that kind of crossed my mind.
yeah, so we're fortunate in that we have some groups that we have relationships with who take care of the beach, and there's a few I'll mention. But the really fortunate thing is that we've kind of worked out like a mutually beneficial relationship where, for the most part, like we'll provide like some support by providing like equipment, and then like they get volunteers and they get out and they do it, and they appreciate, surprisingly, they appreciate us because they've told us that they've tried to go to neighboring beaches and they can't get like any support. And then, so they appreciate that, and then we appreciate them because they're bringing volunteers to help, you know? So we do have the Saturday beach cleanup. It's actually not officially a city event, but it's operated by Stephen Gama, who's also a council member, but we have to call him Stephen Gama when we talk about beach cleanup because it's not as a council member. But both him and Surf Riders do beach cleanups, and then we basically put like trash cans out, and occasionally maybe other like small pieces of equipment, and then they kind of take it and run with it, and provide those services. So it's a great relationship. We don't have, to your point though, I guess it was a long explanation, but it's like, so we don't have an official like city like Friends of the Beach or anything like that, but we've tended to support those cleanups and Surf Rider. And then there's a couple others, but those are the big ones. Surf Rider, as an example, actually came to the last council meeting because they have they're proposing doing a dune restoration project next to parking lot C. And that's another example where essentially we're helping them get the permit from the state. So like we have the staff to do that, and then we're gonna provide trash cans to them, but they're gonna they make the magic happen once that happens, So, so we don't have a formal way to do that or a formal process at this point. There are always paths that the city council could accept donations. So if you have an idea you want to pursue on something like that, we can always follow up on it.
Okay, great, thank you.
The other option is to do something with REACH. We have a nonprofit status, and they're in the process of trying to get a funding for a police dog for drugs. And so they can, Rich Rollins, if you know him, he's involved with that. He might be able to set up a special fund for that. Then it's tax deductible too. So.
That's a really good point. And REACH actually used to be a city nonprofit, and we did have sort of that relationship with them. They recently sort of separated from the city with, and everything between the city and them is good, but it's just they separated more so that they could be more independent and not have to go through all the city processes. So they're a great group too. They're working on some ideas, some veteran recognition ideas, the police dog, a couple other things. So.
Okay, I think that's Any other comments or thoughts? Okay.
I think that your challenge is set for right now,
Yeah.
to add on to
Can you
them.
turn?
I got it on.
Oh, it's on?
That's
Okay.
right.
We're up to our elbows for sure.
Going through whatever you have, let's see next meeting what we
Yeah.
come up with.
It's a whirlwind.
Or it's kind of the beginning and end, so
Yeah,
let's see where it goes from there.
thank you.
I just, in closing, like to say thank you for your work.
Thank you.
You know, you stepped into the city in a mess with, nobody had any idea how bad the financials were, and, you know, immediately have taken some steps to do something about it, so I think we're in good hands, so.
Yeah. Not,
Thank you.
not exactly where I wanted to be yet, but a lot better off than we would have been if we hadn't done anything. So now we just need to get to that last piece. So
thanks to staff.
thank you.
Okay, let's adjourn the meeting at 5:41.
Oh, can I ask, do we? I
It's not
think we-
adjourn the meeting.
Yeah, I think we technically need a recommendation from you all.
Okay.
So could I ask if there's a motion to recommend that the proposed list move forward? This is the one part that, somebody may want to modify, but I think my suggestion would be that the remaining funding from the item that we noted, the Miranda Park that has separate grant funding, that item be allocated towards a public safety cost, because I think that that is an area that we still are trying to find some funding for.
Do we have a motion?
Sure. Yeah, I'll move to approve the staff's recommendation on the budget for Measure U for fiscal year 2025 to 2026 and fiscal year 26-27, with a modification to the 2026-27 budget to reallocate the Miranda Park project to public safety projects.
Perfect, thank you.
Second?
Thank you.
Do we need a roll call, or can we?
We'll do a roll call.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 That works.
Oh, am I doing that wrong?
No, that works.
Okay, sorry. All opposed? None. The motion passes.
All right.
Thank you. Apologize.
On that
I
note,
used-
let's adjourn the meeting now at 5:43.
Awesome,
Thank
thank you. Wow, is it